Shalom, and welcome to the practical Parsha for Parshat Vayeitzei. Actually, it's chapter 28, verse 10, which is actually interesting. Just as a side note, it's very interesting. Why would the Parsha begin at verse 10? It would seem to be logical that a Parsha should begin at the beginning of a chapter, right? Correct? And that actually, without getting into too much detail, or getting off track, that actually almost can lead us back to an interesting controversy or something that's been debated over the years, over the generations, I should say, as it really is unknown who exactly, it's not clear who exactly established these chapters. What is clear, what is certain, is that these parshiot, as we have them divided, the Torah portions, they were certainly divided by Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, by Moshe. So this is sacred. This you cannot tamper with. However, the chapters, as we know, and therefore the verses too, the chapters as we know them, and therefore the enumeration of the verses based on those chapters, well, it's not clear where it comes from. Some even argue that you cannot follow it, you should not follow it, because it comes from an unholy source, because it's clear and obvious that it's not been divided according to the way Moshe divided it, but rather a totally different division. However, for practical purposes, we do find that most of the, what we call Gedolei Yisrael, all the Torah giants, did refer to various verses based on these chapters, and in other words, they used it as a point of reference, because many times it makes it easier, because if you say, what are you going to say, the verse in chapter in the parsha, the 72nd verse, some parshiyot can have over 100 verses. It makes it far easier, and it just became an easier point of reference. Again, I'm not going into the merits of this way, that way. I just wanted to point that out because this is, I think, one of the first times in this Torah reading cycle that we actually find that the parsha does not begin at verse 1, which would make sense. Anyway, how does it begin? Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva Vayelech Harana. Yaakov left Be'er Sheva and went toward Haran. Okay, he went to Haran. Now, I want to just take a step back for a moment, okay? And let's look for a moment, actually, in this same chapter, which perhaps is the reason why whoever did make these chapters chose this as the beginning of the chapter. Look at the beginning of chapter 28 on the previous page. It says, Yitzchak called Yaakov and blessed him. Remember, Rivka got wind by divine prophecy that Esav wants to kill Yaakov, and she called him in and said, listen, you got to go. And then she orchestrated this whole thing by going to her husband Yitzchak and convincing him that Yaakov needs to finally get married, and the only way for him to do so is to find the right girl, obviously, and the right girl is not here, the right girl is there, go to my family. And Yitzchak agrees, it sounds good. She didn't come and tell Yitzchak, listen, your son wants to kill your other son. But she told him that, and that was something that Yitzchak accepted. It was true, it was not a lie. And now Yitzchak calls his son Yaakov after everything that's happened.
Just let details out.
Well, it was unnecessary for her to share with him, and she didn't. She didn't want to cause him aggravation, and what use would it have been? She was able to basically make her point and make her case without having said it, which is a great lesson in itself.
Indeed.
Okay, you're not allowed to lie, but you don't always have to say the whole truth. You don't have to offer the whole truth. Of course, by not offering the truth, by concealing some part of the truth, you're actually somehow creating a scenario which is not true. In other words, it might give a different picture, intimating some kind of lie, then you're not allowed to do that. But in this case, she didn't. It was legitimate. She wants him to get married, and Yitzchak also wants him to get married. And the only place for him to find a bride is there. But let's not focus too much on that. Let's continue here. Yitzchak calls him and he gives him his blessings, and he says to them, you should not marry a woman of the daughters of Canaan. Set out and go to Padan Aram, the house of Bisuel, your mother's brother, and marry one of the daughters of Lavan, your mother's brother. So basically, I want you to go back to the family, just like was done for me. I want you to go and find a bride. And then he says, may the Almighty bless you and protect you, and he should give you all the blessings. And let's go now, fast forward to verse 5. Yitzchak sent Yaakov on his way, and he went to Padan Aram. to Lavan, son of Bisuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rivka, mother of Yaakov and Esav. So, if I asked you at the end of last week's Parsha, which we're at, where is Yaakov now? Where is Yaakov?
In Padan Aram.
Either in Padan Aram or en route to Padan Aram. Okay, he's in transit. Certainly, he's not where Yitzchak lives. Now, where does Yitzchak live? In Beersheba, right? So, what happened here? The Torah gives us an entire verse which raises an eyebrow, an entire verse which is superfluous, totally unnecessarily. Yaakov left Beersheba and he went toward Haran. Moreover, one can ask, previously we referred to this place as Padan Aram. Now we're calling it Haran, which is another name that it had, but why the change? What's going on here? Is it just to be poetic? No, but the Torah doesn't just, it's not trying to impress anyone, not trying to sell books, not trying to fill pages, correct? This is not for the publishing, for the publisher, he wants a thicker book. You understand? What is it exactly that's happening here? So, simply speaking, Rashi tells us that if you really look at the last two verses in the last week's Parsha, you will notice that there was a little detour taken. And what is that? Look at verse 8. Esav thus realized that the daughters of Canaan were evil in the eyes of Yitzchak, his father, and therefore Esav went to Ishmael and took Machalas, the daughter of Ishmael, the son of Avraham, again in the family, as a wife. Okay? Fantastic. And because of that, Rashi's telling us we took a little detour. We went from talking about Yaakov and his trip and took a little detour. Now we're kind of going right back, so it's recapping. That's true. That's a good point. And that's not in any way not consistent with what's going on here. However, still one would ask the question, if that's the case, if all the Torah was, its only objective, all it was out to do was to tell me and to put me back on course of the story of Yaakov, why not just tell us Yaakov went to Padan Aram? Why tell us he left Beersheba, which is obvious. You can't go to Padan Aram without leaving where you are. It's just very obvious, right? Anybody, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out, right?
Yeah.
So what is the Torah telling me? So like everything else in the Torah, especially when there's issue like this where like, hey, what's going on here? In other words, the flags are waving. The lights are blinking. There's a signal here. Something needs to be addressed. Something needs to be noticed. The Torah wants us to notice it. So like everything else in the Torah, I said, and especially this type of stuff, one needs to look into it a little deeper. One needs to go a little beneath the surface and say, okay, what is this telling me? And especially, what is it telling me, not of what happened back then, because the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is a Torah. Torah milashon hora'ah. It's a book of directives, a book of direction. It's an instruction manual. What is the Torah telling me in terms of my life, how I am supposed to live my life, or ideals that we all should aspire to live our lives, by? So it is explained that if one does even a very basic, a very cursory examination, and you think, what is this place Beersheba? What comes to mind when you think of the place Beersheba? Well, you think of the people who live there. Who are the great people who live there? Who are the most memorable people in our history that lived in Beersheba? Interestingly, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all three lived there, and at a certain time they all three lived together, because remember, Yaakov and Esav were actually 13 years old, or according to some accounts maybe 15, but let's just say certainly 13 years old when Avram passed away. If you recall in last week's Parsha, that's when he was making the stew, right, the lentil soup and everything, that's where it all went down. So this is a place which is influenced and inspired by Avraham, who's no longer physically alive, but certainly his legacy certainly lingers on in a very positive way. His son Yitzchak, who's perpetuating his legacy in his own style, in his own manner, but still he's dear to him. As he's a tzaddik. Certainly he's famous. He's the son of Avram. Wow. And then Yaakov. Yaakov wasn't a youngster. Yaakov was already high in age over here. Yaakov at this point, when he's traveling now, he's about the age where most people are, let's just say, happy to be alive still. You know what I'm saying? If you're alive, they consider it a gift. What?
How old was he?
It comes out that when Yaakov got married, he was 84. At this point, he wasn't 84, he was 70. Okay? He wasn't a young man. Okay?
And at this point, people started aging already.
Yes, still not at the rate that we know it today. Because remember that Yitzchak or Avraham was meant to live to 180, he lived to 175. So, Yaakov actually lived the least of them, okay? That Yaakov passed away much younger already, which you can already tell the impact of the changing of the vitality of human bodies. And in Yaakov's case, understand all the pain and suffering that he went through, all the hardships that he went through, did impact his physical well-being. Absolutely. It did impact him, okay? He was 147 years old when he passed away. I mean, anybody here would be happy to live to 90, 100, comfortably, without worries. Correct?
Whoa.
So let's go back to it. Yaakov leaves Be'er Sheva. Leaving Be'er Sheva basically means leaving a spiritual paradise. And there's no reason to imagine that it wasn't also a pretty comfortable place materially, especially it's your native home. It's the place place you're comfortable with.
Business,
everything's there. And certainly we know that Avraham was not only a spiritual man, but he was also very successful. He had means. Yitzchak, the same. So you're leaving a very comfortable situation in all regards. And where are you going? You're going to Haran. Notice, like I pointed out, the Torah calls it Haran. Now, of course, Haran is the name of the place, but the fact that the Torah chooses it here in this verse tells us that the Torah is trying to signal something to us. Haran comes from the word charon af, the anger, a place that incites the anger. We use it as charon af shel makom, a place that incited the anger of the one above. It wasn't a place of good people. Remember, even one of the main characters that's going to really, we're going to spend a lot of time with him throughout this parsha, and even in the future we may a little here and there hear about him. Lavan, who is Yaakov's father-in-law, not a nice guy, okay? Not a nice guy at all, okay? In any sense of the way, right? Not a nice guy, okay? He just happens to be Rivka's brother, and even at the time, if you recall, his father too wasn't such a nice guy. If you recall, when Eliezer came, the servant of Avraham, that suddenly Besul disappears. Where did he fell off? He fell off the map. What happened to him? It says that he died. Because he tried to poison Eliezer, thinking we'll poison him, so we'll get all the money. This guy brought a lot of goodies with him. I mean, that was their way of thinking to you and me. It's like, this guy's ridiculous, this guy's crazy. Yeah. But imagine, for a person who thinks that way,
but that was a person, the modus vivendum of them.
I said, a person who lives in Haran, breathes the air of Haran, that's his way of thinking. He doesn't know another way. You understand? So what happened in his case was that an angel came and switched the dishes. So instead of Eliezer eating the tainted food, he ate the tainted food, and he was gone. So now Rivka was orphaned, okay? At the same time that she has to get married. But getting back to here, so you understand that here is a great person like Yaakov. Somebody who spent his entire life, as the Torah told us in the previous Parsha, in the halls of study, somebody who was immersed in spirituality, and suddenly he has to leave all of that and go out to the dark, cold, evil world.
Indeed.
Okay? And even from a material perspective, understand that you're going away, no matter how comfortable it is on the road, it's still not like being home. And it's still not having the comforts. You're going to the unknown. In fact, we do know that on the way, the belongings that he did take along with him, which is, quite logical to assume, and to imagine, that he took with him a nice sizable amount of money and goods and things that he needed. Yitzchak and Rivka have only 2 sons. Esav is okay, taking care of himself very well. If not, he's taking from others. What's the difference, right? Yaakov is setting out here to get married. You're not going to send him empty-handed. He's not going to show up in just a pair of jeans, right? So he shows up.
Marry your daughter.
Yeah. What do you got, right? So Yaakov is all there, all decked. Along the way, Eliphaz shows up. He meets him along the way. Imagine Yaakov's trekking along, doing his thing, thinking his Torah. Suddenly Eliphaz, his nephew. He didn't come to wish him happy Hanukkah, I promise you. And he didn't come to ask him for his blessings. Eliphaz came to kill him. The orders of his father Esav understood what's going on here. And Esav understood that if he's on the road, if he dies on the road, first of all, it'll take a long time for daddy to find out about it. And second of all, and say, listen, accidents happen, you know what I mean? So he's gonna be rid of Yaakov. He's never gonna get his father to be angry at him and to be upset with him, which he certainly did not want. And that is, he didn't want his father to be hurt, that knowing that his own son killed the other son. So he sends his son, notice, a little cowardly. He didn't go himself. He sends his son, Eliphaz, and he's like, go take care of your uncle. You got to kill him. Don't come back to me without his head. So, Eliphaz now.
Yeah, he's on a mission.
He tells Yaakov, I don't know what to do. I have a dilemma. In the one hand, I have to listen to my dad, and I can't come back without your blood. In the other hand, I can't kill you. He did grow up in Yitzchak's home. He did have some heart. He did have some emotions, some compassion flowing in his veins. What do I do? Elsewhere, actually, some others suggest, he said, look, I know if I try to kill you, you're going to kill me, and I'm going to kill you. We're both going to die. So what am I going to gain from all of this? You know what I mean? My father sent me here on a death wish, What do I do? So Yaakov, you see how wisdom can help? Some people say, what can the Torah? It can't save your life. Well, in this case it did.
Oh, yes.
Yaakov told him something that actually appears in the Talmud. Of course, you're going to ask, what, did Yaakov have a Talmud that he studied it from? But remember, the wisdom that's recorded in the Talmud has been the wisdom of the Torah all the way from the beginning. So Yaakov was privy to it. Yaakov knew it from here. We know it from here, from the book. Yaakov knew it from the source. And Yaakov says that according to the Torah way of thinking, it says, Ani chashuv kemet. A poor person, somebody who is a pauper, an absolute pauper, he's considered like a dead person. Somebody who's stripped of all material belongings. There's nothing, is like a dead person. So technically, if you take everything I own, technically, you've killed me. Take it. Right? And it's not like, nowadays you can go there and ask somebody to use their cell phone, make a call, and have them, Western Union or whatever it is, sell you some money or whatever. Nah. He didn't have anything. And in fact, just to be sure, he stripped down to his very birthday suit. You understand? And in order not to be out there, he didn't know how to protect himself, it says there was water there, and he went and submerged himself in water, and then there's a whole story how he managed to get his first set of clothing. His first set of clothing was that there was a horseman who rode by, and suddenly the horse went crazy, and his foot was stuck still in the saddle, and he fell off, and he drowned that way, and Yaakov was now able to, he was dead. Yaakov was able to take his clothing, put it on, but then he had to, let's just say, escape from that area, thinking that maybe the family of this rider will say, oh, he killed him for his clothing.
Yeah.
So he didn't have it very simple. So I'm just trying to paint you the picture where he left the comfort, the spiritual and material comfort of Be'er Sheva, and he went to Haran. What is really the lesson here? I took my time actually in describing it, but it's important to really take, this is in life. You know, in life, there's a saying in Russian. It's no point in me saying it in Russian, but it says, whoever doesn't risk certainly doesn't get to drink champagne.
Indeed.
It's very pleasant, it's very, very fun. It's a lot of fun to pop that champagne cork and this, but you got to risk. You know, even a team that's playing, there's a risk. Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? And you give it all you got. But you're aware of the fact that there's a 50-50 chance here. You know what I mean? You think you're a better team. You might be in a funk tonight or whatever it is. But you go out there, you risk. The guy sitting on the sideline doesn't risk anything. But he won't get to celebrate. He might get sprayed up with some of the champagne, but he ain't going to get to drink nothing. Why? Because he didn't do anything. He didn't risk anything. He didn't invest. He didn't really put in any effort. Somebody wants to be a successful business person. There's a risk involved. You don't want to risk. You want to have a 9 to 5. That's your risk. Okay, that's the level of risk you're ready to take. That also might dry up. You know, you never know. I mean, you can't walk around pessimistic, but my point is, this is teaching us that in life, especially when it comes to doing good, to generating good in the world, one needs to be ready. One needs to leave Be'er Sheva. One needs to leave their place of comfort, their zone of comfort, and go into really the most adverse place, into, like the Torah is describing it, Haron, which is Haron Avshel Makam, a place of that, you know, incites God's anger.
Also, how will you ever know? I mean, it's a funny picture, but how will you know how good a Jeep is if you don't put them in the dirt?
True.
You know, if you don't put that Jeep through rocks, river, hills, tundra, how good you will know it is, how well it is, what it's made of.
That is precisely the point. Some people say, well, I don't need to know what it is. Okay, but you're never going to enjoy the fun. I'm talking more obviously in a more...
Absolutely.
In a more
spiritual level.
Yeah, and something which is obviously more substantive, manner. This is telling us exactly what we see today. Today, this phenomena actually, this comes from the Rebbe. Today we have a phenomena where so many young people who grow up in a religious, community, in the comfort of a Be'er Sheva, wherever it may be, right? Under the umbrella of spirituality in Crown Heights, wherever it is. And then they pick up one day and they move to a distant place. That place doesn't have to be geographically distant, but we're talking about spiritually. It could be millions of miles away, distant from where they grew up and what they're used to, what they're accustomed to, okay? And what is conducive to normal life. And it makes sense. You live with your own. You live, not always the Jews live, quote unquote, in the shtetl or in the ghettos because they were forced to. It was just a certain choice, a certain way of life. They had no reason to mingle out there and to assimilate. No, the whole point was you're a religious Jew, you live within a circle of religious Jews, a religious community. It's conducive for religious life. You have what you need, you have your food, you have your inspiration, you have your synagogue, you have the schools. Why you have the people who think like you, who walk like you, who talk like you.
You're not a stranger.
You're not a stranger. Why go into a strange place? Why just throw that all away and go out there out in the cold? If you want to be warm, you stay near the fire. So this message, this lesson, is actually the most prudent nowadays. When you go out there and you see how many people, sadly, are so ignorant when it comes to Judaism. And the level of assimilation is astounding. I mean, it's just frightening. And that's all due to the fact that there's Jews spread out all over. And sadly, most of what they know is not Judaism, or perhaps all of what they know is not Judaism. They know very little, almost nothing about Judaism. This is the message. And what do we see? This Yaakov who went out there and he started off with nothing, and spiritually speaking, he was now going into, like I said, going from heaven to the opposite. But look what he came back with. By the time we're done this Parsha, what does Yaakov have? Yaakov has now the fathers of all the 12 tribes of Israel. We are all their descendants. Remember, not even Avraham, not even Yitzchak accomplished that. If I can even use these words, they didn't merit to have what Yaakov had. They had 2 sons each. Well, one went his way, not their way. Yaakov had all 12 of his sons going his way. And this is a promise to one who's ready to leave the comfort of the spiritual, heaven, the material heaven behind, and go out there and do for others. Go out there even into the most adverse place and help them. The blessing, the reward that Hashem gives them is they come back with all their children, with all their, all their tribes intact, and they in turn are able to produce more and more and more and more and more Jews and tribes and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, it's the only way that you are going to actually put in function all the galactic laws, or the knowledge that you accumulate, and I have come across many Jews that couldn't even say the Ve'achavta. You're like, but you come on, you're born into this. And
that's why we're here.
Exactly, bingo. That's what we're here.
Let's just touch on another few things here. Verse 11, it says, "Vayifka b'makom vayalam sham." He reached a place and he spent the night there. Why? Because the sun had set. Okay, and this in itself needs to be explained. What does it mean because the sun had set? Well, it says it set suddenly. Hashem wanted him to rest there. But I want to focus on the first 2 words of the verse. And he reached a place, Vayifka b'makom. The real true meaning, the real translation, the literal translation of the word Vayifka means and he encountered the place, which is not typical of saying he arrived there. Usually in the Torah it says Vayavo el hamakom. He came to the place. You don't encounter a place, you come to a place. It's a geographic location which you have arrived at. Why does the Torah use this term? Because the sages tell us that the word Vayifga also can come from the root word which means to plead, to beg, to pray. And this hints to the fact that Yaakov at this time had established a prayer. We know that in the life of a Jew, there are 3 prayers that we typically say every day. Of course, on special occasions such as Shabbat and the festivals, there's an added prayer. But that prayer doesn't have a name. It's called Musaf. It's an addition. An addition to what? An addition to the norm, to the staple of 3 prayers per day. So the sages tell us that Avraham was the one who instituted the prayer that we do in the morning, Shacharit, and it's hinted when it says at the story of the Akedah, the binding of it says Avraham rose early in the morning. So we know that that's the prayer. We say it in as an introduction to the prayers of the morning. Then by Yitzchak later, which we learned 2 weeks ago, when it says that Yitzchak went out lasuach basadeh, which in that context means he went out to walk in the field, but lasuach is not the typical term, the typical verb that's used for walking in the field. Rather, lasuach comes from the word sicha, which means to talk. When you pray, you talk. You have to actually utter the words. So that was in the afternoon. It says towards the evening. That was the afternoon. And that hints to the fact that Yitzchak instituted this second prayer of the day, which is mincha. And Yaakov, now we find, this is the source in the Torah where it hints, of course it doesn't say it clearly, but it hints to the fact that Yaakov instituted the third prayer in the day, which is the prayer of Ma'ariv, of Arvit. Now it's interesting that there's actually a discussion as to what is the order of the prayers. When you enumerate the 3 prayers, now, what is the reason, what is the basis for this discussion or debate? Well, first of all, we just said the order in which they were instituted. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's clear that Avraham came first, Yitzchak came second, Yaakov came later. Moreover, a person's day begins in the morning and ends at night. Not only a person's day, but if you're aware of how the service, the offerings in the Holy Temple took place, also the order of service was that it began in the morning and it wound down towards the end of the day and it shut down at night. The only thing that would happen at night was that there was a guard and that whatever was left on the altar burning from the day. But as far as new service, there was no new service offered, right? There was nothing until the next morning. However, on the other hand, we do know that the order of the Jewish calendar is what? As the order of creation, as it says in the beginning of this book. Vayhi erev, vayhi boker. It was evening, then it was day. Morning and then day. Then you have a full day. When you start to celebrate anything, Shabbat, Friday night. You don't start Shabbat morning. You don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, it's Shabbat. No, that's the way. Where were you the last 16 hours? You know what I mean? Where you been? You know what I mean? 17 hours. Where you been? Shabbat starts Friday evening. So that is actually the discussion is how do you enumerate the prayers? Shacharit, Mincha, Ma'ariv, or Arvit, Mariv, Shacharit, Mincha. And there's merit for either way. But the bottom line is, the reason why I'm bringing it up is, because the fact is that typically we enumerate them in this order of Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit. Without getting into the why, just saying the what, because typically what you do see is a very interesting thing. The morning prayer is the longest, okay? Mincha is quite short relative to Shacharit, and Ma'ariv is just a tad longer, more or less. Mincha and Ma'ariv are just about the same size, more or less. Okay, certainly time-wise, it takes time in the minyan. They kind of take the same time because the mincha has the repetition of the Amidah, whereas the Arvit doesn't, which is a discussion in itself why it does or does not. But in any case, the question is why? Why would the Shacharit be that long, that elaborate? It takes time, even for the most quickest minyan.
I get up at 5 in the morning just in order that I can do it and have time to do the rest of my day.
So the speed, even somebody who's a speed reader, I mean, certainly you need to have kavanah, you need to think what you're saying, you need to pay attention to it, you have to be emotionally invested. But still, even if you do it very quickly, it's going to take you some time. Whereas mincha, if you do very quickly, I mean, it might be a tad too quick, but 5-10 minutes, that's it. I mean, won't take more than that, unless it's in, with the repetition, 15 minutes max. But the shacharit takes time.
Yeah.
Why? And the answer is, and this is why we prefer, or I should say the preferred enumeration of these tefillot, of the prayers, is shacharit, mincha, arvit, because shacharit is considered in a person's life in the beginning of the day, and it sets the entire tone for the day until the pinnacle, until the time when you do the arvit, and then of course you retire for the night. Just kind of what the idea is, you finish your day, you wind down your day. And therefore, for shacharit, you're actually building up the momentum. You're setting the stage for how you're going to serve Hashem that whole day. So it's almost like a motor, like an engine. It can take time for it to warm up. But once it's warmed up, the idea is that, you still need a little fuel to keep it going, but much less relative to how much you needed it to get it fired up and to really crank it up and to really get it going. You understand? To get that momentum built up, to get all the pistons really shooting well. So that is the shacharit. And if a person prays really properly, what one accomplishes through the shacharit, which is going to be hinted in a moment, and this is why I went into the whole thing, going through the various stages of elevation, starting from the very bottom and going up, 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 up. The idea is that the infusion of spirituality, that connection, should last a person throughout the day, even so that the person is now going to, after shacharit, going out there into the mundane world, whether it's to their job or whatever, their business, whatever they do, but that effect is going to linger, that effect is going to stay with them. And when they reach mincha, even if that effect became a little cooled off, but it's going to be very quick and easy to fire up, and the same with the arvit, once you wound the day. Now, where do I go with all these stages and levels? Let's look over here. He reached the place and he spent the night there, right? He says because the sun had set. He took some of the stones of that place and arranged them around his head, and he lay down to sleep in that place. He dreamt. And behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and the top of it reached toward heaven. And behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. What is this ladder that he saw? What is this metaphoric ladder? This is the ladder of prayer. What he saw was that connection between the earth and the heaven. What does that mean? That is what we do. Remember, the ladder, even when you ascend the ladder, there's still a connection to the earth. The idea is that you don't pull the ladder up with you as you go up, right? The ladder is connected down here to the earth. But the point of the ladder and the beauty of the ladder is that you can ascend all the way and high, which is really the point of prayer. The point of prayer is not that one should ascend spirituality and reach such a level where they become totally disconnected from the world. No, because the fact is that after you finish the prayer, what is a person supposed to do? Yes, a person is supposed to study a little Torah, but what are you supposed to do? As it says, quote, a man should go out to his work, right? And to his job. You need to go out there. Hashem made it that we need to go out there, and whatever one's profession is, whatever one's means of earning a living, you have to go out there and do it. Thus, this ladder stays connected to the ground. But the idea of it is to give us now that access to the very high, to the very heaven. And those angels, you see them ascending, but they're also able to descend in our minds, our angels, our connections. Let's look at those angels' connections, have to be able to come back down and influence us and inspire us throughout the entire day. So this is just a wrap up again of the three prayers and how we, approach it. We call it Shacharit, Mincha, Ma'ariv. That's how we enumerate the three. Even though, in a sense, there would be an argument to say you should start with the night one, right? And it's true for some matters. For example, it says in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, that every person has to make a point to make at least 100 blessings per day. The clock on those 100 blessings start ticking from nightfall or sunset, but certainly when it's night. In other words, from the evening prayer, that's when that clock starts ticking, okay? And until the next evening, till the next sunset or nightfall, depending how you look at it, okay? But it's not...
Every brachot should be made with
kavana.
With kavana and intention.
Now you're making it too hard for the people. Let's just say the brachot first. Let's start at let's start at the bottom of the ladder, okay? Say the brachot, have a basic intention, but if you make it to 100 times a day, I have to actually stop everything I'm doing for a moment at least. And it's not a lot. Absolutely. It's not a lot of time. But the point is that we make 100 blessings, and that is our connection on high, okay? And this is something that starts at night. But really the prayer regimen, going back to what I was saying, begins in the morning when we set the whole tone for the day. And this is also the equivalent of the service in the Holy Temple, where they would begin in the morning and end at night. And if anything, it would go through the night, the remnants, the leftovers of the offerings. Anyway, there's so much more to talk about, but we have to keep it within a certain realm. So we'll stop here. Any questions?
So far, so good.
Okay, so we'll take it till here. Shalom.
Shalom.